afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for another live event. We want to thank our partners, Curaleaf, for working with us on this event today, and the Rooted in Good initiative, which is part of the Curaleaf brand. Today, we have a really great conversation today, and I'm really happy because I am talking with fellow moms, and we are talking about having a conversation. So it is going to be very conversational. And I would love for those who are watching, if you have questions, because we do want to have an open dialogue, pop the questions in the comments and we'll have folks answer them. Today's conversation is a cannabis conversation from the lens of being a parent. So we have 3 additional parents, myself included, so 4 in total, that are women in this space, entrepreneurs, building the damn thing, but we also represent intersectionality within this space because I'm a caregiver. Some are patients. Some are caregivers for patients in the program. So it's a whole different vantage point. So I have the awesome pleasure of bringing up Rebecca, who's the founder of Acute on Chronic out of Chicago, Amy Chin, founder of Calm Better Days, which is a CBD retail, and she's a coach also, and Gena from 024, who created a wonderful fragrance line. And let me just get them up so they can introduce themselves. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Awesome.
Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Excited to have this conversation about, being a parent and working in cannabis, being a cannabis entrepreneur or a medical patient. How does that look? How do you have those conversations with your kids about, what they're experiencing, what you're experiencing, so on and so forth. So before we get started, everyone, can you please introduce yourself, your brand, your business, what have you? And I'm going to start with Gena. You're muted, Mama.
Yeah. I'm Gena Surphlis, founder of 024. We're a fragrance brand with patented scent technology that neutralizes the cannabis smell. So I'm based out of New York, and I am a parent of a son who is a medical patient here in New York State.
Perfect. And Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Abraham. I am a registered nurse, and I'm the founder of Acute on Chronic. What we do is I noticed there's a really big gap in care between healthcare and cannabis. So we bridge those two together. We help guide patients on what products they should use, how much they should use. We talk to their doctor. We talk about drug interaction. We educate both the industry and healthcare. I am also a medical cannabis patient in Illinois. I am also the caregiver for a mother who is a medical cannabis patient. And I'm a mom and entrepreneur.
all the boxes there, all the boxes. Perfect. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Chin, founder of Calm Better Days. I am a cannabis coach, and I help people who are new to plant medicine understand how to consume. So I also go over how it works in your body, different delivery methods, how to find your dose. And I got into this space because I have anxiety and depression, which CBD and cannabis really helped me. And I am a mom of 2 girls, 6 and 10, and an entrepreneur also.
Awesome. All right. So, and I should introduce myself, right? Tanya Osborne. Those of you who don't know me, I am the director of community for Women Grow. And Women Grow, as you know, is an organization that really empowers women to build businesses and grow businesses in the space. Also the founder of the Canadiva, which is like this group of a little more intersectional, because not everyone's in business. Some women just love the plant. They just love the plant. They want to be around other women that love the plant, and they may be patients, they may be entrepreneurs, what have you. And there's a lovely overlap between the two because there are so many women who, do what women do, everything. So that's what we do. So let's jump right in, and the Canna talk. Who has had, I know most of us, I know I have pretty early. What did the cannabis talk look like for you? And obviously we all have children of different ages. My son is 15 years old. Amy, you said 6 and 10?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Mine are 5 and 9.
5. Oh, that's close. Cool.
Yeah.
Look at the 4-year thing. And Gena, you have one son, yes?
26.
26. Okay. So you've been having that conversation. You've had that conversation probably first before all of us.
And in a different environment, right? The
Yeah.
environment, there was no decriminalization. It wasn't legal at the time, even for medicinal use at the time. So the
Right.
conversation was very different then.
So what did that conversation look like for you when you, like, did you bring it up or did you find something or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so my son has sickle cell anemia, and he was actually having a crisis, and we were in the hospital, and he was 16 at the time, and he asked me, had I ever used cannabis? How I use weed? And my mom was actually in the room. I don't think my mom knew, but she found out that day. And I said, yes, I did. And why do you ask? And so he talked about in high school, he had friends that were, experimenting, and what did I feel about it? And, I came from a place of talking about the criminal repercussions because of the time we were in, but that I do consume, and it's okay. But let's talk about it as you get a little bit older. For me, it was I was open about it, but I didn't close the conversation. I wanted to table it until he got a little bit older. And that happened right before he went to college. He came home from hanging out with friends, and I smelled it on him. And for me, again, it came from a place of who is it? Where did they get it from? You never know if you get pulled over. It was that conversation and what's going to happen. And don't do that. Like, just wait. And he did. He did wait. And then when he turned 20, we ended up having another conversation. And so as you can see, there's this staircase moment of how the conversation changes. And at 20, so did society change in terms of how we were looking at things at the time. And we talked about it from a medicinal standpoint. He was talking about his crises, and he actually had done some desk research. And what I told him, I was very proud of him for that. Let's actually see, wait, what happens? 21, let's do it. And everything happened on time. It became medicinally available, and he was able to become a patient at 21.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So the conversation changed over time, which I think it has to. So, like, Amy, have you had that conversation with your young ones?
Absolutely. When I started my company, since I'm always talking about CBD, and at this time, New York was not legal yet. So I always made sure to use the words plant medicine and CBD, because I did not want to risk her going to school and using the word cannabis and having ACS called. Right. So I was very mindful of that. And as time goes on, I'm going to, and I've read 2 books to her. And that conversation, like Gena said, is going to change as time goes on, because then we're going to introduce all the other cannabinoids and talk about that, and how mommy, and I've gone over it with her, that mommy uses it as medicine. And that is what I do. I help people understand how to use plant medicine.
Awesome. And Rebecca, how about for yours?
So
you're in a similar age range.
Yeah. And I have had my business since 2019. So when I started my business, my daughter was 2.5 years old. So she was pretty little, and it was strange. We never had like a sit down conversation. They knew that I worked in the hospital during COVID, because as an entrepreneur, I was doing both at the same time, of course, and COVID came and there was not enough ICU nurses. So there I was. So my son asked, when I started working from home more, he said, "What kind of nurse are you now? Why aren't you in the ICU?" And I was like, "Oh, so there's this plant. It is a medicine. But people didn't know that for a long time. It was illegal. And now I help doctors learn about it, and other nurses, and I help patients use it." And he's like, "Oh, that makes sense." And my daughter just overheard me enough times on Zoom calls say I was a cannabis nurse. And I never thought to address it with her beyond what I said to my son, because she's 2, 3, 4, until one day at school, everyone said, what does everybody's grown-ups do? And she said, "Oh, my mommy is a cannabis nurse." And no one questioned it in any way, shape, or form. And so it's really interesting and natural for them.
Right.
They don't have a stigma at all to cannabis. Even my son made me a pin at a craft fair with like a leaf on it. He's like, "This is for your business," and so it's very interesting. So I know that conversation is going to change eventually. I had promotional cookies with no nothing in them. They were just cookies with sugar, and they were the plant leaf with the Acute on Chronic, and my son brought it to school as a snack. And I had to tell him, like, you can't do that. And he's like, why? You said it's just a plant. And so no real conversation, but it's really interesting. The kind of paradigm they live in is probably very different than any of us imagined. So
That I'm actually very similar, because when I started working with Women Grow, I didn't have childcare, so my son came with me to all of the signature networking events. So and we had them at a co-working space, so I kind of parked him with his school books, like a tablet. I'll check in on you. And he was like my resident helper. He knew what I was doing because he was there and he overheard. And I wouldn't say until so around 10, 11 that I decided to have a real formal conversation, because he was like learning by osmosis. I would ask him questions, he would answer me. I'm like, oh, okay. But it wasn't like a formal conversation until he got diagnosed with scoliosis. And he's fine now. We just had to, work him out a little bit. But I was terrified to tell him, like Amy, I was just like, these are pain gummies. They help with your pain. Because I also did not want my son to go to school and have CPS knocking at my door the next day because some teacher didn't understand, and there's a bigger issue. So it has changed, because now he's 15 and it has changed, and I know we'll circle back to that. Out of curiosity, did any of your children, it doesn't seem so, push back, like that they were not interested, did not want to be bothered, did not want to hear it? I didn't have any experiences like that either. He's just over me talking about it. He's like, can we talk about something else? I'm like, well, you don't have to be in here, you could be somewhere else, go to your room, but it's like hearing that. But I didn't have any pushback. I'm curious if anyone in the audience experienced any pushback. Someone actually commented, look at that. And I bring them when I can. Yep. So they understand plant medicine. Well, funny story, and then I'll move on. My son, when he started middle school, he came home and he was like, Mom. And I'm like, what? He's like, is weed and cannabis the same thing? And I'm like, yeah, because I say cannabis all the time.
Right.
I never said weed or any of the, I say weed to my friends, but I don't use it around him. And he really did not know that they were the same thing. So I was like, wait, where'd you hear weed? If I don't say it, who's talking about it? But middle school, and there were other folks that, that were engaging. And yeah, so we also know that it does need to be revisited. So when and I'm going to pull on Rebecca for this, if you sat with a patient who is a minor, because I know, Gena, your son was a little older, so I don't know if you had to experience that, talking to the school administration, if the child is using cannabis as medicine, have you had experiences around that?
So I can actually answer this one incredibly well. For a brief 2 years of my life, it was incredibly difficult. I encourage everyone to do this at least once in their life. I actually served on a school board for a high school. And beyond that, we do have many patients who are minors. In particular, Illinois, we are lucky enough to have a law, and some of these patients are in Illinois. We're lucky enough to have a law where the school nurse is allowed to give medical cannabis. Hooray. What was really nice is on the school board, the topic of vaping, both cannabis and non-cannabis, would come up quite a bit and what to do about it.
Right.
When I pushed back as the only nurse on the school board and said, we really shouldn't be doing discipline, we should be doing more education. Because kids were having to go to court over these tickets, and that could really derail somebody's life, and it enters them into the criminal justice system, which is just not need to be. And I was like, we live in a community where there's many vape shops and dispensaries, yet we're going to punish kids for having access. We should focus more on education than punishing. And that ended up being a fine conversation, and the rest of the board agreed. So that wasn't as overwhelming as I assumed it would be. And then with the patients that we've had that are minors, sometimes pediatricians are much more fearful than adult providers, just because we have a little bit of a gap, and cannabis is a safe substance, but we have a gap in research. And with adults, we could deal with that a little more, but with the pediatric population, you're always worried, right? Because everything's growing and changing in their cells. The pediatric patients that we have, with the consent of their pediatrician, have gone extraordinarily well. We have at least a handful of teens that had such a significant rare illness that they were not able to participate in school the entire year. It was really affecting their social life and their education. And with actually medical cannabis, they are going to school more, they feel better. So we've had a really good result, and we have had really no pushback from any educational body at this time. I'm always kind of prepared for that, but the only problem, I haven't had any pushback from neighbors either. The only thing that has come up is sometimes when something smells like cannabis or flower, oftentimes the local teens will be like, well, we know Rebecca, the cannabis nurse, it's probably coming from her. That's really it, is other parents will be like, my child has tried to scapegoat you, but that's it.
So I'm wondering if that's state specific, because in New York, pardon the train, I live right on the highway. In New York, a law had to be passed. We have a mom in our community who has a son who is in the program. They were 2 or 3 when they joined the program, and because in New York, prior to this law, which she initiated, she would have to, the school nurse would not administer the little person's dropper of CBD for their epilepsy. Mm-hmm. So she would have to leave work and go and come back and leave. And it was like really cumbersome. Like, your job's at jeopardy and that's your livelihood. So she worked with some of her legislators to craft this legislation that will, and it's in effect now, to allow the school nurse to be the caregiver for your child. So, which is really amazing, because that's like, I know Gena started her company in essence because of her son and worrying about him consuming and the smell. That's how she designed her line. Like kick-ass moms like make stuff happen when it's like, what do they say? The something to something is invention, or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, see, now it just went out. It went out of my head. But essentially, you're trying to find a solution.
Stuff
right?
happens, and you make stuff happen.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So in New York specifically,
Right.
You can have or elect your child's caregiver to be the school nurse.
Mhm.
If you're, because imagine if you don't work around the corner from the school to go into the building and just be like, open your mouth and then run out. Can you imagine? You know, so there's necessity. Thank you, Megan. Necessity is the mother of invention. Thank you so much, because I was beat myself up trying to remember that. And then there was another comment I want to bring up. Sabrina, I can't wait for the day legalization occurs so that the fear and threat of CPS is no longer a possibility. My children are 18, 7, 4, and 1.5. And she's had the talk with their 2 eldest, and they just know it's for adults, and there's no hiding that cannabis is medicine. Listen, advocacy works too. I have dragged my little one to Albany. to make sure that he understands that we're fighting, because he had asthma as a child too. And I said, imagine if you couldn't get your asthma medication because somebody deemed it illegal,
Right.
you
Right.
know? So he was like, well, that's not fair.
I actually don't have the school, but remember, my son was working. So he had to have these conversations with jobs, and they had to be okay. Remember, there was drug testing.
Yes.
There was, so that's still something I'm always clear with him. You're making sure you're having these conversations. They are aware that you are a medical patient, because it's the same thing. It's just not school.
No, it really is. And that's really for everyone who is a medical patient when you think about it.
Yep.
When you're a medical patient, you do have to tell your employers. You don't have to tell your employees if they're going to test you.
Right.
You may need to make them aware that you are a medical patient, because that's going to come up.
It is.
It's going to come up. And now how do you have to deal with that, Okay. So we're all working and entrepreneurs in this space, right? I know I got pushback from my community, my friends and family outside of the cannabis community, as to my bringing my son around. Why are you letting him be around all these, pardon me, work life, and their perception? Why are you letting your son be around all these consumers? And I'm like, what do you think is happening at my events? You know what I mean? So there was pushback really from my non-cannabis community initially, as to them feeling I was exposing my child to too much information or what have you. Did either of you experience any of that?
Absolutely, 100%.
Maybe let's start with you. Oh, okay.
No.
She's been silent over there.
Definitely a lot of, well, I wouldn't say pushback. I think when I announced that of what I was doing, my company, they kind of, just a lot of silence. They didn't understand. I don't think they even knew what to ask. So I think silence was probably their way of showing support without being critical. So, and I understand that now. It's very unconventional, I guess, to them. So, but I see that as an opportunity to talk to them about it.
Right.
And talk about my experience and how it helped me. So now they're slowly coming around, slowly understanding a little bit. That was the amount of pushback I got.
Okay, but the silence sometimes, like the silence is deafening, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm the key of slogans today, right?
Yeah, it's definitely deafening. And at the moment, I didn't feel supported at all.
Wow.
Because it was just like silence, no questions. It was just kind of like disregarded. Next topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I get that. I understand that. Gena?
Yeah. I was raised by a member of law enforcement. So I was raised with stigmas. So for me, with my son, family definitely was not okay with that. But for me, the question was, but you're okay with the opiates? Go figure. So that, as time has gone on, and I took some classes with the Hood Incubator, I was in their cohort, it helped me to be more educated, to have those conversations with people, because if you educate people, right, knowledge is power, then they're able to really understand it historically, systemically, and why we're where we're at now, right? That has definitely helped. So I think it has loosened the grip a little bit in terms of, a reluctance to hear or understand. But the idea was, he's my son and he's a grown person. This is what he's going to do. And it's not anything negative. And so that's, again, back to that narrative that's still it's so deep in some of us still.
Yeah, no, same here. Rebecca, what was your experience with being an entrepreneur in this space and having small children?
Yeah. In 2019 and 2018, when I was reading and becoming certified as a cannabis nurse, initially, some friends and family members really, I got the silence too, a little bit of side eye gossip. Fast forward post pandemic, it has significantly changed. Whereas more people are asking me questions, more people are interested in what I'm doing. So I firmly am somebody who believed that you can indeed change the hearts and minds of people with education and just essentially talking about these things out loud. That has helped. And then I want to circle back really fast how you bring your child to, networking events and legislative things. I literally encourage all women to do that at all times as frequently as possible. I used to be, what inspired me to have my own business was I was part of a nonprofit where we worked on women in business and women in politics, nonpartisan. We did a lot of lobbying. And one of the things we did is we encouraged everyone to bring their kids to the Capitol, bring them to the fundraiser, bring them to the luncheon. Sometimes we would give childcare. It really affected legislators. And in fact, my first kind of big moment in cannabis with my daughter was there was a governor candidate who was giving a talk to our women's group, and I had her with, and he said something so backwards about medical cannabis. And he is from a famous political family. Very, very backwards. He did lose the governor's race, thank heavens, and we have a lovely pro-cannabis governor now. But he said cannabis was dangerous, and with my baby in my arms, I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And that made a difference, to other women in the room. It got in this newspaper briefly. So always bring your children, when you are trying to advocate for medical cannabis or really anything else. That makes a difference because people see that you care enough to, do the difficult task. And we all know it's much easier to get a sitter if you can, rather than to schlep your child with you. You care so much that you have this teeny tiny person with you.
And initially it was childcare, but after a while, I was so glad to have him with me because at one point there was a young girl, Alexis, out of Colorado, who was originally from New Jersey, who had to move to Colorado to get access to her medicine. That's the first time I'd ever heard the term cannabis refugee. And then she ended up suing Jeff Sessions. She was 12. My son at the time was 10. And I took him with me down to City Hall to fight for her. And I have a really great picture of him holding up a picket sign, and I think that really, it solidified for him that this was medicine and prohibition was not fair. Yeah. In its most simplest form, he understood that this young girl needed her medicine to live, and it was being denied. And he knows that it's a plant, and he just could not understand. And I was just like, exactly. I think listen, I know some schools here in New York that are teaching 3-year-olds Mandarin, and they're not Chinese. Like, the kids can learn so well, so young. Why are we afraid to teach them this plant? And I think that as more women come into this space and know, that will be a big pivot, because advocacy is really everything. You know what I mean? All right. So I asked this question because I actually have felt that in some way I have contributed to the stigma. And what I mean is, there have been times that I have over worried. I don't know if that's a real, where my own view of, yes, New York State is legal now. You can carry cannabis on your person, but stuff happens. And, I have a 15-year-old Black son, so I am still really like, don't do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And then part of me is like, am I contributing to him feeling a certain way around it? And it's just I think still, and you know, Gena mentioned it early, there's still a little fear, even though, you know, have any of you experienced anything like that where you may feel like you're kind of contributing to the stigma a little bit, and maybe not the stigma, but just your fear around policing or prohibition, or the perception maybe not let you let your freak flag high, you know what I mean? So does anyone have any situation that they can resonate with that?
I think so. From more leaning towards what you're saying of having a son and a Black male, maybe for me, it's where you're consuming, right? Like, is it private, or are you outside, or are you like, I look at it, for me, it's more ritualistic. It's more in small groups by myself versus I'm not necessarily outside doing it, because that's the stigma. That's how I was raised, in that way, right? Like, if they're outside and you're smoking, you're a slacker, which is not the case. That's ridiculous. But I think that's still innate in me there, because I was raised in that way. So it's more breaking away from that way of just be mindful of how you consume and where you're at, because you are a Black male. That's really what it is. It really is for me. So I could see that. And I like that question, because it brings it to the forefront to pay attention and be more mindful of how I'm speaking to him about that.
I agree.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I'm very conscious about where I'm consuming, who's with me. If I'm with my kids, it's a different consumption method than when I'm with my friends. Also, depending where I am. And it's just been conditioned because it's been illegal for so long. So, especially as a parent, right? You don't want your kids taken away from you. So very, very mindful about where I'm consuming and how. But in terms of the stigma with my family and friends, I am very, very conscious about it, and go from, again, talking about my experience and how it helps me to be a better parent. Because when I was at my worst with anxiety and depression, I was not the mom I had imagined to be. I was horrible. I was cranky, highly irritable. I was that yelling mom. They probably would have taken me away because I was that yelling mom, you know? So it's helped me so much in that sense that I share that to let them know I'm a better parent, more patient, more understanding, working with compassion. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's very strange, right? Because especially in the mom culture in America, right, there is such an acceptance of having a glass of wine or a cocktail while you're with your kids, or having a play date, right? We have coffee and wine all the time at play dates, or people have no problem. And obviously, if you're in pain or feeling anxious, you absolutely should take your medicine. You know, no hangups about taking, you know, a Xanax or an Ativan or an opioid, right? Or an NSAID. And even when I consume, you know, even microdose to even play with my children or have a play date, I will hide it. And it's really interesting, right? Like, this is what I do. And there's still responsibility there, right? Just like you could have half a glass of wine and take care of your children, you could also, you know, microdose and do a fine job. And I agree with what Amy said, the taking away of, like, I have medical cannabis because I have severe migraines and anxiety. And yeah, you're more in, when parents use medical cannabis or recreational, and of course, I want to be respectful that laws everywhere are different. And so the privilege that I have living in outside of Chicago, in Illinois, is very different from what a mom in Indiana experiences. Even another legal state nearby, medical, is in Missouri. We have a very different situation, just 4 hours away. Yeah, it's very strict. It does help parents, especially moms, because we always have a running to-do list, and we all have the unpaid domestic labor. It just, it helps really take away that anxiety. I also will say that I can absolutely empathize with what to tell my children. I do have that fear because I could see law enforcement, even in legal markets like Illinois, California, New York, there is a big difference on what happens to me if I get pulled over and I accidentally have cannabis in my car versus what happens to somebody who does not look like me. That is very different. And even in legal states, we are still doing harm, even in people's occupations, what happens to them at traffic stops. So my children are biracial. My husband's South Indian. And so I do think about that, like some of the things that I do by accident or on purpose. I have to, again, in the future, have a conversation with my son and my daughter about how, kind of keeping it real until there's dramatic change. So,
and like you said, it is such a thing that you have to think about. But honestly, it has normalized for me. I need a break. Like what I have one thing with parenting and using cannabis. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna come back, and then we're gonna talk, and things are gonna be better, and I'll do that, and I'll do what I do, and then I come back. I'm like, what are we doing? Let's go. Where are we going? I mean, it is, and I want to normalize that. I am not a wine mom, at all. When I go out with friends to a bar, they're like looking for me because I'm outside. I'm outside. Don't the drink is sitting there. I'm outside. So my friends are used to it now, but now when you talk about your kids, and believe me, I don't consume in front of my child. Does anyone consume in front of their kids? Like full out? Oh, well, he's a grown ass man. I saw him last night. He's just as tall as you.
But I only started maybe last year because I still had the
feeling. I can't even imagine that. Like, I can't right now. I can't imagine it.
I had the feeling still of,
you go over there.
Maybe not. Now it's different. But again, it took me time. You're still always a mom. It doesn't matter. We're still mommies, and he's still, I don't care if he's 26. He's still my baby.
He's still mama's boy.
I still want to make sure I'm giving a good, I want to be a good role model for him, whatever that is.
I love what Amy said too. When your consumption changes based on where you are, I do the same thing. It's what I don't like pens, but if I got to bring one, I got to bring one. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I consume, I'm usually using edibles and a pen too. So if I need to take a pull, sometimes if they're not looking, I take a quick pull. That's good. That's all I need.
Listen, the best thing they ever made was those amusement parks that you could go on and on and on and on and on. So my son would get off and he'd like, can I go back? I'm like,
yeah,
go right ahead. I saw somebody commented, Mama needs 5 minutes and it helps me parent better. And absolutely. I would say it may not help you parent better, but it allows you to take a pause. Sometimes in parenting, we don't stop. We just keep going. It's like, do the laundry, get the dishes done. I got to do my business. I got to send some emails. I got to, cook dinner. I got to get ready for tomorrow. I have a meeting. I have a Zoom call. It allows you to be like, okay, look, I'm going to step over here outside on the terrace for a minute. I'm going to come back. And then we're going to pace ourselves. We're going to do this a little better now. And I think that's for me. That's for me what works, take a little break. Someone else said, my children are standing on the back porch or the front door, and that she definitely doesn't hide it. That's me contributing to the stigma. I'm going to be honest with you.
It's true.
Has he walked out and caught like some residues of a bong hit? Absolutely. Or me like trying to hold it and I'm going to die because I'm like, wait a minute, get out, please, so I don't pass out. That is me contributing to I don't smoke around my son. He has walked in by accident, but it's not something that I do. But I think that's just my own personal hang up. I feel safe here to say that. It's a safe space, Let's see, we have some other comments. It allows to curb the anxiety and being overwhelmed by life to have patience. That's it.
Yes.
That's the one for me. It allows me to take a minute, take a breath, and then go back and do what I got to do, you know? So that's awesome.
It's very grounding. So it allows me to respond instead of react to all the things that are happening.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
And to be in the moment, like, especially as I had smaller children in a pandemic. Yeah, Tanya and Amy, you did too. Just the ability to play and enjoy it. Like, we all have that mom guilt, right? Like, are we doing good enough? Are we playing good enough? Are we paying enough attention to our children? And it's really nice to just be like, I'm just going to play Legos and we're going to build the best dragon that ever was. And you could do that, you know?
Yeah.
And I've talked to this with physicians and therapists, and they have also noticed that other parents do this, and it actually helps them significantly. So if you are in a state and a place that you can do that, definitely do. Yeah.
Yes.
Listen, I like to cook with my son. I like to, you know, we can get down in the kitchen, you know, that's fun for me. But like sometimes I'm like, I'll be right back. You know, it's just what we have to do. So how can we, the next question is, how can we work to truly destigmatize the conversation of cannabis with our friends and community? I think we hit on that. I know, Amy, being the fact that you're an educator by your business, that has to be one of the biggest, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And I find that when you explain how it works in your body, our endocannabinoid system, that really changes their perspective on it. Because when you understand how it heals everything, because when you see the ads, like, oh, it can help from Alzheimer's to anxiety to Parkinson's, you're like, how can this plant do everything, right? And it almost sounds too good to be true. But when you explain how it all works, then the aha moment goes off and they're like, then they're more open to it, because who doesn't want to find relief? Who doesn't want a natural alternative to prescription drugs? So that really demystifying that really helps in having them change their perspective. And again, I always love to go back to my experience with it. And then it really helps to change the view on cannabis.
Absolutely. Gena, you want to input anything there?
No.
Rebecca, any input on the education? How do we destigmatize? We're leaning with education.
Yeah.
We're leaning with education. Let's say we go for it. Because in reality, like, my mother was not a consumer until she had to be. She had kidney disease. She was not able to take opiates for pain, and cannabis was really the only thing that worked for her. And can I tell you, the part that makes me the most sad was the medical folks who knew that my mom couldn't take opiates for pain were very okay with, like, you're going to take a crap load of Tylenols. You know, you're just going to, and they never, that's my son. They never even thought to recommend or bring up cannabis in the conversation. And that, till this day, I'm so grateful for my knowledge and the community that I have to be able to, like, some of the doctor, we got a free cert from a doctor who I love, and people were like showing me how to shop the program. And so that was fantastic. But like, it was so disappointing that no one, it would never have come up. Yeah. It never came up. And that is, till this day, one of the saddest things that I've experienced with my mom's care, was that, but the grateful part is that I knew enough, you know, and pulled on the resources that I have to make a difference. You know what I mean? So it's a big deal. So, and the only medical person here is Rebecca. What's the deal, man? Like, what do we need to do?
Education. I will say, so doctors and nurses were funny right? So I say, anybody listening, email us, call us. We will educate your doctor for free. In fact, we will buy them lunch to educate them. So a lot of people in the space of botanical medicine, and this includes not only cannabis, but even herbal supplements, functional medicine, acupuncture. There are things in medicine and nursing that we know work, except for some reason, when people get really into those things, something happens where people get really turned off by the medicine system that we have, and they go really extreme into the alternative complementary world, and they kind of wash their hands of everything Western medicine. I saw that happening, and coming from an academic medical center my whole career, and being married to a physician, once I educated myself where I felt sufficient enough to teach physicians on this and felt confident enough to do it, I thought, let me see what happens if I go the other way. Now, I might get yelled at a lot. I might get the door slammed in my face, but I don't care. It has to be done. So I just started telling doctors everywhere, community hospitals, academic medical centers, it didn't matter. Can I just give you education on medical cannabis? I promise it's not sales pitchy. I'll tell you what I do, but I just want to educate you. That was really the key. Once a physician heard our talk and we presented the research and what we know and what we didn't know in an honest way, but overall that cannabis is a safe medication and a safe supplement that is a better safety profile than NSAIDs, really anything that we give people, they were like, oh, you can't die. Oh my God, wait, oh gosh, this is safe. And then they started recommending cannabis and use it. So it literally is going into their world, speaking their language, and getting the buy-in. And from there, we've been asked to teach fellows. We've been asked to do grand rounds. And so slowly but surely we are changing it. But it was just really not fearing them saying no. I forgot to mention, I am getting a doctorate in nursing, and my entire doctorate project and thesis is bridging this gap between cannabis and healthcare. So getting early recommendations is something that I care about deeply, deeply, deeply. And a goal is to, and we have talked to insurance companies even about this, and physicians, is one of my projects that I want to research. Feel free if you want to join in, and if you want to loop in other healthcare facilities, is what happens when we recommend medical cannabis to patients early, particularly with chronic pain, dementia, and oncology. What happens? My hypothesis is we decrease ER visits, we improve quality of life, we decrease length of stay, and we decrease litigation and poor outcomes. Your mother and my mother, they must be besties, because my mom was the same way about medical cannabis. She, despite me doing this work and really doing my best to try and be an expert in the clinical nursing application to this, when my mom got colon cancer, she still didn't want to use medical cannabis. And it wasn't until my husband said, your daughter is literally one of the leading nurse scientists on this. I really think you should see one of her nurses. It could help you. Where she did it after I talked to her oncologist. It indeed worked. She, she never, she's in remission from a pretty aggressive cancer. I think that had a lot to do with luck and chemotherapy, but with her symptom control, she was able to eat. She never lost her appetite. And she never had to use the prescription medications for pain or nausea, or sleep or anything, and has no residual side effects. So what happens if we have medical cannabis enter the picture much earlier? I really think there's so much promise. But yeah, talking about the experience of your experience, family members' experience, and just literally telling your doctor, like, hey, look, like, I know this is scary to you. Please, 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 can you get educated? Because once I had a doctor just say, like, wait, you can't die. Like, that's the thing I hear most. Like, you can't die. And when I explain how, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, fine, sure. I'm okay.
Well, then we're going to have to circle back to you, and I need like a little snippet of your talk, so that people just be like, hold on, you sit tight and you watch this, because
Absolutely.
I mean, I have a doctor who I love. Like, I love this doctor. I've been with her 20 years. Every time I mention cannabis, she's like, Tanya. And I'm like, if I didn't love you so much, I would like hit you over the head.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, someone asked Rebecca, are you operating here, let me just put it. Are you operating what state are you in? Are you national?
We're national. What's really great is so we do actually have a nurse in New York. And we're hiring nurses all over the country, but we are able to do telehealth and guidance through that. But yeah, we talk to doctors everywhere. And what's really great is now what's great is these clinical researchers and heads of department are emailing us to see if their research is core, like what our opinions of what we're seeing on the clinical side. So yeah, we will happily talk to your doctors. We will buy them lunch. We will do grand rounds. My favorite thing is when we have a patient with fantastic success, we usually try to make a poster or a case study out of it. And then we're presenting at medical conferences. And that's where we're really starting to reach physicians, where they say, wait a minute, did this patient, were they high all the time? And the answer is no, they were not. And you don't have to be high all the time. And they were like, wait, this actually worked. And we were like, yes, this actually worked. So that is, it's really great. And so we hope to continue doing that, but little by little, step by step.
I'm full support of that, Rebecca, because that is amazing. I mean, I have a couple of like one doctor in particular, Dr. Chin. I think we all know Dr. Janella Chin. She's like my go-to if I have a question. I'm like, what's the deal? What's the deal with this? And she's like, you know, she's so wonderful. But that's a privilege that we have working in the industry. So that's why I think like reaching out and education is so important, because it is a really big luxury to be able to like send an email to one of the top doctors in New York State and ask her for help, you know, or some guidance. That's a really big luxury. But you all can find us and we can tap those resources. So you are not alone. If you're out there and think that you are not alone. So as we start to like wrap up, and it's a big question, but it's not. What are a few words that you would share with parents who are on the fence about being open about cannabis with their children? What would you tell them? I'll start with Gena.
I would say, just like we are open about sexual health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol, I would say to be open about it, because the misinformation is in abundance. And so I'd rather be that point of information for my child. So have those conversations. I mean, it's very simple for me. Open dialogue. If you don't feel judged, you're not judging yourself, then no one else is going to judge you. That's how I feel. So I just think you have to have those open conversations with your children and just think of it and relate it to everything else you talk to them about.
Right. Like you don't want your kid to eat a 5-pound bag of sugar either.
You don't.
You know, so yes. And it's okay, let's move around. Rebecca, what would you tell a mom who's on the fence about having that conversation?
Yes. Absolutely have it. Assuming you are in the right location to have it, I think is key. Because something that kind of keeps me up at night is because I know what women experience here in Illinois and what women experience in other states is not the same. So yes, if you are in a recreational or medical state where you are confident that you can have this conversation, absolutely have it. For sure. In fact, my biggest fear is not that my children will be interested in cannabis when they are age appropriate, but sometimes I'm worried that they will rebel and experiment with other significantly actual dangerous things because they will think that plant medicine is so uncool because like that's what their mom does. So have the conversation. I always compare the LGBTQ community and cannabis and changing that mental terrain and changing hearts and minds. You know, it wasn't that long ago where same-sex marriage was really a debate and very stigmatized, right? And it didn't change that long ago. And why did it change? It's because we saw Will and Grace. It's because there were shows like Modern Family where we saw TV and the L Word and all sorts of things, and Bravo, right? We saw that actually on TV. People felt comfortable. And I think cannabis is going to go through this same thing. We're going to see, our peers, other moms, a diverse kind of scope of people using cannabis. I live in a neighborhood that we speak over 99 languages. We're a huge refugee community. And breaking stigma in various Muslim communities, the Assyrian community, the Indian community. It kind of, once somebody starts using it and talking about it, it kind of goes. So I always, sorry, that's kind of long-winded, but yes, you're in a safe place. Absolutely talk about it. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, bring your children to any political advocacy thing that you need to do. It does make a difference. And you have to really change hearts and minds. And I'm very confident that cannabis is on that path.
Thank you. Amy?
Same sentiments, just reinforcing the idea, depending on where your state stands, make sure to use specific terms so that you don't get into any trouble. So call it plant medicine or CBD. That way you don't get into trouble.
Yeah, because New York has not caught up. Unfortunately, CPS hasn't gotten the memo that we're legal. So we're working on that one. And Rebecca, you said something funny that there was a fear that your child would go to another route because their parent works in cannabis. My son told me the other day, I don't want cannabis. I think I'll drink.
Yes.
I was like,
I'm sorry.
And in my head, I'm going, I'm going to get you so drunk. You're never going to want to drink again.
I am so worried that when my children go to raves or concerts or whatever they're doing in 10 years that's trendy, they're going to be like, oh, that's medicine. That's grandma stuff. Like, let's do ecstasy. I'll be like, no.
That will probably happen.
And that's what's really nice about plants. Like, you can
just
use cannabis and you don't have to worry about dying. You don't have to worry about your child going and dying from using too much cannabis. Using too much alcohol, like in college, like that's a real thing,
Yes.
You could lose this is going to bore everybody, but even ecstasy, you can mess up your sodium balance doing ecstasy. I'm so scared of my children doing anything where they have to think too much about what their sodium level is. Scares the hell out of me.
The things moms worry about. Someone said, great conversation, ladies. I don't know why this is my son's name. Was the mom not hiding medication from the children and smoked occasionally while pregnant for appetite? I feel that. I think there's a lot of more studies coming out around cannabis and pregnancy and breastfeeding. I don't have anything to share, but I know that there's research being done. Nausea, big thing with a lot of folks. And listen, I know we're talking about kids, and I just want to say education for the children are so important, especially around this middle to high school area. Because not only has CPS not caught up, a lot of the school administrators have not caught up.
Yep.
So, and knowing things are legal is fine, but adult use is legal, 21 and over. And there is conversations that need to be had with school administrators, because they will start that, pipeline, because they'll call the police. They'll have too much enforcement around cannabis. So there are all these outreaches for doctors also need to be done in the school. We have some stuff planned with some school administrators to bring them on, because in reality, like Rebecca said about educating doctors, the school administration really does have a good hold on your child's future. So if they're not educated, that's why we all at one point had a fear about saying cannabis to our kids, because we didn't know what was going to happen. And it's not because of law enforcement. It's because of the school administration not understanding and we want to make sure our kids are safe. So there's so much education. I made a joke to someone. I said, I'm going to be doing cannabis 101s till I'm like 90 years old, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel
absolutely.
like I've been doing them for the last 8 years, and I think I'm going to still continue to educate all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
And school boards, beyond doctors, I say, yeah, after being on a school board, school boards, because the school to prison pipeline in some places is realer than real. And so if we could mitigate that with school board education, not everywhere is lucky enough to have a elected school board. So educating those administrators and the people they hire to not ruin children's lives over one adolescent mistake in something that is legal in the adult market in many states and overall safe. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, if you're a parent, like
Yeah. So I had what are some resources? I don't personally have too many, but I always point to one thing. Believe it or not, it's a YouTube video. It's it's on Netflix. Ricky Lake did a documentary called Weed the People.
Oh yeah.
And it was her, she did like this documentary thing, and they worked with I think 5 or 6 families that had very, very young children, like infants or like young children that all had some form of cancers. And it was some elected to use cannabis, some elected to not, some elected to use both, and it just followed their stories. And it was like a punch in the chest. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you, but some of the results and some of the things that they shared were really mind-opening for me. And it was a great thing to point to, because if you're above a certain age, you know who Ricky Lake is, you know what I mean? So, and she's famous for these documentaries. She's done a few of them, but that one was so well done. And I'm a big thing for YouTube. I will find some videos and send people some videos. And from the medical perspective, Rebecca, what resources could we find or could we pull to share?
The Society of Cannabis Clinicians, I really, really like. That is kind of where we all join internationally to collaborate about what we're seeing. There's an American one, and then there's the International Society of Cannabis Clinicians. The American Cannabis Nurse Association oftentimes has a lot of resources that can be used. Project CBD is actually pretty good regarding cannabis. And I will say, PubMed, if you are interested in if you want to deep dive into the science, you could find anything you want to find in PubMed. It's a public resource of literally research. Sometimes you can't get the full article, but you could read there. I do caution people when they look at medical literature. One of the biggest things that I say is be cautious of things published before a certain time, because prior to 2017, we do not know what people were consuming. It was the underground market. We don't know how much. We don't know what it was mixed with. And it's all retrospective data. So sometimes some of the bad things we saw happening may not, or probably not, have been happening from cannabis. The more robust data is post 2017. And then know that more than any other medication or supplement ever, there has been more money given to research, billions of dollars, to show the harms of cannabis, not the benefits. So we really have fleshed out really what can go horrifically wrong, and it's very, very little. But no, sleep soundly knowing billions of dollars have been spent, and not only is it difficult to find things that can go wrong, they keep finding new benefits. So the safety profile has been really fleshed out. So just know, when you read these medical journals, things sound sometimes scarier than are real. There was recently one about cardiac risk, and it said there's a 78% chance of having an abnormal heart rate when you use medical cannabis. But that 78% chance was just an increase from like a 0.08 chance of an abnormal heartbeat to like 1.34. So the total risk was quite small, but the journalists made it sound like if you use medical cannabis, you're going to just have an arrhythmia and die, and they're going to be doing chest compressions anywhere you go.
Oh
No,
my God.
it just was like this much of an increased risk. And if you told somebody you're going to feel better with your chronic pain, but teensy bit increased risk of having your heart, go into an abnormal rhythm, like most people are going to, it's not that large of a chance. So
Wow.
yeah. So being cautious of what's happening, and kind of know the backstory. Sometimes the PubMed is a great resource. But yeah, hopefully, I have to shout, I love Women Grow. Like, what you guys do is amazing. You support so many women doing amazing things in advocacy and being an entrepreneur. Holy schmolies. So with you find women, I am 100% sure that within the next couple years, we could all put our heads together and start growing more reputable resources. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And we need all of our help. And this is definitely a community mission, because we're Canna Moms. There's the next generation of Canna Moms. There's the moms that we don't know who, like I said, aren't as fortunate as we are to be in this community. Because it is, I always make, it's not a joke, but there's some mom somewhere who's still hiding, who's still fearful, who's still literally waiting for everybody to go to sleep so she can go in the garage, and that's not us, and that's a gift. But
Yeah.
I always try and keep mindful of those moms, and however we can support them, that's what we want to do, so how does everybody find you? Because I know that people are going to want to find you afterwards, so please share like your handle and so on and so forth. And if you want to wrap up like with like a word of wisdom, so a word of wisdom, and where can people find you? We'll start with Gena.
I'm 0 to 4, so we're on Instagram at discover024. My personal is IAM Gena, GENAS. Words of wisdom, I would say, is educate yourself so you can educate others. And I'm continually educating myself. I don't have as much time in the space as maybe some of you. So for me, it really is a consistent journey of education, of educating myself. And that way I can share with those around me. That's my word of wisdom.
Rebecca, word of wisdom, and where can people find you?
So you can find us at www.acuteonchronic.com, Acute on Chronic on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Our TikTok is Acute Chronic RN, and then our Insta is Acute on Chronic RN 420. And my words of wisdom, gosh, it really is. Do not be afraid to take your children into these advocacy spaces or legislative spaces. I always say, especially because I really feel for these women in other states, because, even in legal states, we are not yet perfect. And there are still people's lives being ruined over a very safe supplement and medicine. Bring your children. Politicians work for you, not the other way around. Bring those kids to Springfield. Bring them to the fundraiser. Take them with you, and it really is impactful. So do not hide your children. Do not think anybody thinks less of you. They might. You will prove them wrong when you show up like a baddie at the Capitol with your children in tow. That's my words of wisdom.
Thank you so much. Amy, where can people find you, and a word of wisdom?
They can find me at my website. It's calmbetterdays.co, C-O, not C-O-M. And my handle on Instagram is at calm_better_days. And my words of wisdom is also to educate yourself, but also find your tribe, because your tribe will support you. You can talk things out with them. And if you have problems, you have someone to lean on, and it'll encourage you and give you the support and confidence to go and navigate this whole situation with cannabis.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Again, this is Tanya from Women Grow. You could find me at Women Grow. You can also find me at the Canna Diva. My little tidbit of information is really just being authentic. We all use this for medicine. Even if you're not a medical patient, mine is like going out to a club and you bring a couple of joints with you. Like, most people use this for medicine, and you shouldn't be ashamed of your medicine. And as far as children go, I said it before, children can learn. We teach them every day, and cannabis is no different. You know, the more they learn now, and I mean, age appropriate, you know, conversations will change. A conversation with a 4-year-old is different than a 14-year-old, than a 24-year-old, you know, because they are our babies forever. No matter how big they get, they're always our babies. And we're going to continue to have these conversations. Just be you, you know, be strong, pull on your, like Amy said, pull on your community. I even said to one of my moms, and Amy knows some of these women, I said, listen, if you want cannabis before I'm ready to do it, call Aunt Kimber, call Aunt Ali, you know, like call somebody who I know you're going to be safe with, because I may not, maybe I'm not ready, you know, and at least I know you go to a trusted source, and that I feel safe. So it's just creating the relationship with your child and with their relationship with cannabis, or their knowledge of. And I think that that's all we could really do.
Yep.
They're going to come back and ask more questions. They're going to come back when they hear a word that they didn't understand. And as long as we meet them with the grace and understanding and with education, they're going to be just fine. Right?
Yep. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. We're going to continue to have these conversations, but I appreciate Gena from 024, Rebecca from Acute on Chronic, and Amy from Calm Better Days. And I am Tanya from Women Grow and the Canada. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.